I want to welcome everyone to our second day of our board meetings. For those of you, this is your first one here. Our emergency exits are these doors that, to my right, if you're looking at me to the left, hit the hallway, right or left, and then you're out of the building. Restrooms are right across the hall. I thought I saw him around here. We want to welcome the Highway Patrol. They come and help with our security and that, so they're here providing a good service for us. So we'll get started. First item is board member message. We usually have that on Thursday, but board member Mark Marsh had a family thing he had to deal with, and so we're going to have his message today. So, there it is, wrong mouse. There we go. Board member Marsh.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Huntsman. As I thought about something I might share with you that is a part of what we do and what I think is important, something that I wanted to highlight today was our technology colleges and the opportunities that they're affording our students in high school to get a certificate that can put them into the workforce quickly, and that they can not only be a career pathway, but they can also be a stepping stone to higher education also. Having had a son go through this type of a program and get his way into his career, I want to talk about that maybe a little later, but some of the things that we have here that they offer students an opportunity to get a certificate in your healthcare, information technologies, trades, and services. Having served on the MTech board for a number of years, it was interesting to see how many students had gone through there and coming out of high school actually left high school with a certificate and could work at a real job while they were going through higher education, or go into a career and started to better themselves and maybe move up to higher education later. What brought this to my attention was I work for the Home Depot in Park City, and I have contractors come to the contractor's desk every day doing business with us. And as I did that, I have so many contractors looking for somebody to go to work. They don't want to hire a warm body. They want to hire somebody that is educated, that are either that or has some experience, and they want them ready to go to work. We have to look at that as we look through our educational system as one of our customers that we serve here as a board. Our customers mainly are students, trying to get them the best education we can, but also we should be serving our customers, who is the business side, who partner with us, who are willing to work with us on a day-to-day basis to help get people educated and get them into the workforce. I have a fellow that runs a plumbing company right now. He is looking for CTE graduates. He is looking for someone who has possibly a little bit of experience but hasn't done much. He is willing to allow them to pay for their first semester, quarter, whatever of schooling, and then he will start back paying it as they continue through, and he will pay for their education. So as they go through this and they get a certificate through the tech colleges, they have hands-on experience, so they've worked with the stuff, his pipes and plumbing that he wants and he needs, but he's begging for help. There's many companies like that. I have electricians that are doing the same thing, just trying to get someone into the workforce. A young man that I knew of applied for one of their jobs. They've put him through school there, and now he's decided to move up in the electrical world, and they are paying for his higher education, and he's going to school while he works for them and provides a living for his young family. I think that's interesting. I have a son who went into nursing, and I want to talk a little bit about his pathway there. He started with the MTech and got a degree as a CNA. He wanted to become a nurse, but he couldn't get into college because he didn't have the right classes, the right experience to get into the program he wanted to be. So he took the CTE classes, got into there and got his certificate as a CNA, With that, he had, number one, the experience they were looking for. Number two, he had a certificate, which bumped him up into there. He went on to school. He's gotten a 4-year degree with a business administration certificate on top of it through 4-year colleges. He attended almost every one in the state, but at the same time he got out of there. He has a degree at that, and at age 31, he is the director for a home health care and hospice company. Just because I felt that little boost that the CTE gave him at first and the experience, and he was able to work as a CNA while he was going to school and provide for his family alongside, which made it so that his wife didn't have to work and could stay home with their young son. I think that the things we have to look at in there, I wanted to spotlight MTech just because it gives you a chance to look at what impact it has. And the MTech serves 4,500 students right now, and that's basically, they're based out of Lehigh. There at Thanksgiving Point is their main campus. They built a new one there while I was serving on the board. They service 7 school districts, 27 high schools, and 31 charter schools in that area, where kids are going and getting an education in high school, and most of them are graduating with a certificate when they leave there that puts them able to either work and put themselves through school or go to work, and they're certified and can move up through apprenticeships and go into higher education to get more. They have the secondary students in their membership hours up there. The secondary students in high schools make up 46% of their student body. So people that are learning trades such as welding, plumbing, electrical, culinary arts, whatever, make that a great thing to do. And the increase that they've had over the last year, just in the last year, has been almost a 5% growth of people wanting to get a better education. And that's something that we worked on. The governor's talked about getting people, career ready, college or career ready, and that includes your technical colleges, either getting a certificate or a degree of some type. I wanted to go in there, one thing that was very good for my son and for many others that do it, 99.5% of the students who graduate, they graduate debt-free, no student loans, because they're either earning enough money to pay for their tuition, they're getting scholarships which are offered, or they are also being paid by their employers that are willing to hire them on and let them go to school and pay for their schooling. Imagine what that would be like if someone that was trying to be a doctor could do that same thing without the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they put into schooling and their living expenses. 79% of the students who are in the tech system right now graduate each year with a certificate. 20% of them are in the progress of getting theirs that are there. They also offer, apprenticeships through companies that work and help facilitate students in apprenticeships. Right now, MTech has 785 students in apprenticeships, and I think they could have more because there are companies that are looking for people to hire. As we go through and look at that, MTech is also hooked in with UVU, and they have a pathway that's already created so that they can go through and make it happen to move right on into UVU's programs, and they facilitate that and help them move right on through the system so that they don't find a roadblock or can't figure out how to get involved. They help that, and they also have a 98% placement of students who leave the tech colleges right now who find employment. Sometimes that's the toughest part for people that have a degree and they get into a field that's maybe not as popular, not as busy, and they have a hard time finding some place to work, but technical colleges can facilitate that. I have an example here. A 4-year dental student at Midwest University named Austin went to MTech down there. He took the dental assisting program and got during his senior year in high school, got his certificate. He worked as a dental assistant while receiving his bachelor's degree at UVU, and then that gave him 7 years of dental experience before he started his classwork into dental school to become a full-fledged dentist, and so he's able to do that. And another example of a student that was there named Alyssa, she received an associate's degree from UVU in engineering design technology, and she's currently applying for internships. And her comment was that they want technical experience, and I have done everything else, but now it's too late to try to get that experience before she got there. A solution that MTech could have done for her, they could have placed her in the MTech program pre-engineering courses, and hers, believe it or not, was in welding. She'll probably be the star of the next Flash dance because she's a welder. She could have earned a certificate that was related to her field, and then she could have been working in that field while receiving her associate's degree at UVU, because she would have been taken down that pathway and right on into school. I think that our work that we do here as a board, as we work with technical colleges and we try to make good decisions for the places where it affects our high school students, and the support and the working relationship we have makes it important for us to always remember that as we are visiting people in our area, and that we also take an advantage to go visit the technical college in your area and see what it is that they do. My favorite thing at board meetings was to go to the culinary arts department. I have a love for cooking and doing things like that, and it was fun. We worked trying to get a satellite campus in the Park City School District between the North Summit, South Summit, and Park City School Districts as we served on that MCAT board at the time. It's the MTech now. To have that pilot campus up there, and they were willing, Deer Valley and some of these world-class restaurants were willing to donate and pay their chefs to come and be the instructors for that campus so that they could get people into their place of employment that had experience, that knew what they were doing. And so I think we have to look at opportunities and help and push and do what we can, and just encourage all of you to get out and visit your technical colleges in your area. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mark. We have some changes on our agenda. I think it's safe to recognize Lorraine Thorpe. You're what's that?
Lorianne.
Oh, Lorianne, where did I get? I've got you on my brain. Lorianne, sorry. Lorianne here, the governor, as you know, we have a vacancy. Board member Hanson moved and created this vacancy, and the governor, there's a process to fill it, and the governor's been working that process, and Lorianne applied, and right now it's in the Senate process. Right now, we were hoping that would be completed by today, and it isn't, so we want to welcome you to our, I guess you're not a board, we haven't sworn you in or anything yet. We got to finish that Senate process, but we want to welcome you to our meetings. If you get lost, just ask somebody, and it'll get you where you, we know you're very familiar with this building, and just wanted to recognize you as all the board members did, and other people of who you are, and hopefully everything works out pretty smoothly quickly. So I'd like to fill that seat. So welcome. Thank you. Okay, some other changes, but not to our agenda. We're required to have our annual training on our Open Public Meeting Act. Both of our, and it's kind of odd that it happens, but both of our AAGs are unable to give us this training today for medical and health reasons, both of them kind of different things, not related. But we are fortunate enough to have Jeff Van Holten, our policy advisor, will be giving us that training. So we'll invite you up, and you have a PowerPoint, don't you? And we appreciate you taking this on. What's a short?
Very short notice, yes. Jeff Van Holten, Policy Advisor. I was asked about an hour ago if I could do this for you all, and I was just handed the PowerPoint. Luckily, it has talking points in it. Yeah, so,
There's,
yeah, feel free.
and then we can correct Board Member Lear if she's wrong.
Absolutely.
Several people have had a lot of this training in the past through USBA and other organizations, but it is important for us to have it and be reminded and refreshed on what that looks like. So we welcome you.
Thank you.
So are you wanting to get through the presentation and then take questions, or do you just want to take questions along the way? What flavor do you want?
That's an interesting question about questions. I am not going to sugarcoat the idea that I am some type of expert on the Open and Public Meetings Act. I'm familiar with it enough that I feel like I can go through some talking points. I might be more comfortable writing down your questions and sending you email responses later once I've
Okay,
conferred
very good.
notes, if that works for everyone else.
All right, thank you for addressing that. So please continue.
Yes, welcome to your Open and Public Meetings Act training, everyone. So the philosophy and purpose, and I am going to just forewarn you now, because of lack of ability to prepare, I'm going to be breaking my presentation rule where I will be reading a lot to you. I try usually to keep it more conversational, but for the sake of getting through the training and making sure that we get the right information, I will not ad-lib too much. So the philosophy and purpose of the Open and Public Meetings Act, you're a board and you exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business and should conduct deliberations and take actions openly. A meeting, including a workshop or an executive session in which a quorum is present, must be open to the public. We will discuss a little bit more of the definitions of meeting. You may or may not be surprised by what is and is not. Just keep in mind, a quorum, if they're present, it has to be open to the public unless it fits within the legal exemptions that are in code. So, some basic principles. Oh, and I am even unfamiliar with how the slides will lay out before you as I keep hitting the button. So this is a fun discovery together. So we'll start with a public body. So I'm going to go through public body, quorum, and meeting, and I'm going to let you know what the definitions are. So a public body in statute means any administrative, advisory, executive, or legislative body of the state or its political subdivisions, which would include school districts, that is created by the Utah Constitution, statute, rule, ordinance, or resolution, consists of 2 or more persons, expends, disperses, or is supported in whole or in part by tax revenue, and is vested with the authority to make decisions regarding the public's business. So I would dare say that is definitely you. You fit within this squarely. One thing that I have noticed in my time in the public sector is creation of things via resolution can get a little tricky. That's something you may all want to consider. That some of the advisory groups that you create and whatnot, there's been conversation in the past of whether or not that's created by a resolution through your policies. Believe we have settled on it is not. There's some technicalities there, but we do have to be careful on how we create things, because if it does trigger that resolution piece, you might have a group that is actually subject to the Open and Public Meetings Act. What is a quorum? It is a simple majority. Hopefully that one is the easiest definition for you all. And what is a meeting? My favorite part about the law is definitions are never exactly what you think they are. So I'll let you know right now what a meeting is according to statute. So in code it says a meeting means the convening of a public body, which you fall into that definition, with a quorum present, including a workshop or an executive session, whether in person or by means of electronic communications, we'll visit that later, or the purpose of discussing, receiving comments from the public about, or acting upon a matter over which the public body has jurisdiction or advisory power. Here is what a meeting is not, which is just as important. A chance gathering or social gathering, which I would hope you are all doing on the regular with each other. A meeting does not mean the convening of a public body that has both legislative and executive responsibilities. If no public funds are appropriated for expenditure during the time of the public body is convened, and the public body is convened solely for the discussion or implementation of administrative or operational matters, for which no formal action by the public body is required, and that would not come before the public body for discussion or action in a normal setting. Feeling good so far about where we're at? Okay. I'm doing all right, Carol? Sure, sure. So let's talk about the process really fast. You need to make the public aware of what you are doing, and that would include the following: the date and the time, the location, the agenda, and you also need to establish the rules of order that you're going to conduct these meetings in, and you need to set and follow your bylaws. So it's always important to review your board bylaws and make sure you're following those, part of your requirement under the Open and Public Meetings Act. You're required to notice your meeting at least 24 hours ahead of time, and the agenda has to be reasonably specific. That is a word actually that phrase has been adjudicated multiple times in court cases here in Utah about how do you meet the reasonable specificity requirement. And the reason why that is important is you are not allowed to take any formal action on something that is not on the agenda. So you can't put this nice, broad, vague stuff as your agenda item and then discuss anything you want. That is not reasonably specific. So make sure that as you see the agenda, that as you're talking about things, it fits squarely within something that has been specified on the agenda. Otherwise, you cannot take action on it. You can also not begin the meeting before you have a quorum present. You can begin the meeting without a quorum. You can't take any action until a quorum is present, including the approval of the minutes. That is it on that one. The next one, close meetings. This is the fun part. So when can you close a meeting versus having to have things happen in the open? First, there's the process for how to close, and then we'll discuss what can happen in a closed meeting and what cannot happen in a closed meeting. So first, you have to start with an open meeting. Even if the entire meeting is planned to be closed, you have to start open and then go through the procedure to close it. On this one, you need a quorum present, but you also need a 2/3 vote to close the meeting. So you have to have more than a simple majority of those present in order to close it. And what can you discuss in a closed meeting? So what does it have to be in order for it to be closed? So you can close a meeting if all of those things happen, and you also have to record each vote. So your vote will have to be specified. That will go out actually on a public record. But you can close a meeting for the following purposes: the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, strategy sessions to discuss collective bargaining, pending or reasonably imminent litigation, or the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property. You can close for a discussion regarding deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems, and some portions of the procurement process you can close a meeting to discuss as well. We're doing okay so far? Okay. Next, we'll talk about the open meeting versus a public forum. This is actually a conversation that comes up a lot. What does it mean to have an open meeting in relation to interactions with the public when they attend? Legally speaking, the public is allowed to come and observe in an open meeting. An open meeting is not a public forum where the public has the right to provide discourse or get up and say whatever they want. The only right they have in this space is to observe. You have the ability to extend things beyond that, which you do when you offer your public comment period. But you do not have to engage public as they're disrupting in the open meeting, and you can actually have disruptive members of the public removed without violating the Open and Public Meetings Act, because again, their only right for this specific purpose of an open meeting is to observe the meeting. The next is the keeping of a record. This is the part Lorraine does for you very well. You need to have written minutes. They do not have to be a direct transcription of every single word, which I'm sure Lorraine is very grateful for, that she does not have to write every word that you all say. If she did, I would really love to see her on the shorthand keyboard doing transcribing. They need to contain the date, the time, and the place, the matters, actions, and that were taken, and the vote, and discretionary to even include comments of the board members, which Lorraine does sometimes on her minutes if there's pertinent elements of the discussion. They can include individuals from the public recognized by the presiding officer and the substance of their comments. So you can move to have those added to the minutes if you would like. And the recording is permanent. Just remember that. The minutes, however, are the official record of the board. The audio recording needs to be posted within 3 days of the meeting, and the minutes and drafts need to be posted in a reasonable time after they have been approved. But the drop dead deadline is 3 days after official approval of the minutes. And then once they are done and posted, they are subject to the GRAMMA laws because they are now a public record. Why? Oh, it's one of those slides that actually had things that would appear as I hit the button. I apologize. So let's talk about violations. Why, the big reason why you don't want to violate the Open and Public Meetings Act, it would actually have the potential to void the actions you took. So the rules that you passed, the policies that you passed and voted on would suddenly be null and void. You would have to start over and do it again in an open public meeting. You want to make sure you don't put yourself through that process if you can avoid it. And now the rest of the training is going to be going through some hypotheticals. This is definitely the part where I would not recommend asking me in-depth questions, but to either write your questions down for the AAGs or I can write them down for you. But there are some things to think about through some of these hypotheticals and some court cases that have ruled in a certain way that you should keep in mind. Feel free. I just promise you no solid answers from me.
If we're missing, well, certainly this is a training, and you can, and he'll either say, I'll answer your question or not, but hopefully it's not a test of his knowledge, but. So do you have a question, Board Member Lear, or do you have a comment or a question?
Well,
You want to turn your mic on?
I just wondered if we're supposed to talk or not. That's-
Well, he made a request, but sometimes we don't follow those, but go ahead. You have the mic.
I was more interested in what was prospective, but I did think it was maybe interesting to make a point about what you just said about items that where you don't follow the Public and Open Meetings Act. I think sometimes people automatically think it's void, but it's not. It's just voidable.
Correct.
So it could be that some action is taken in violation of the Public Meetings Act that nobody has any problems about. In fact, the public is glad that it's been dealt with. And so I just think that's an important distinction. But I'll listen knowing that I don't have to be completely
So,
mute.
Yes. And
so
to
before he moves on and gets into the others, does anyone else have any other questions?
you guys are very kind to me. Thank you.
Please continue.
And just to add to Carol's point, the graphic actually on this slide is very relevant. A lawsuit would need to be filed, and the procedures with the court would have to go forward in order to void the action, but it is voidable at that point. So this is think about this. So you have ongoing discussions among members about the superintendent and the contract and expressing your views about, it says his performance, but we will say her performance, absolutely. This can include one-on-one contacts, personal conversations with one another, telephone calls, all happening separately, multiple times. No poll is taken during this moment. You're not getting a sense of like, does Sid keep her job or does she not keep her job? None of that's being discussed. You're just discussing her performance. So if that happened, you have a series of unofficial communications. Have you violated the Open and Public Meetings Act? So the courts have said a series of unofficial closed meetings with less than a quorum. So you're doing one-on-one conversation. It wasn't 8 of you having one conversation. But totaling a quorum, so you spoke to 8 different people at different times, when taken together, can violate the spirit of the law. Yes. So the courts have said you can violate the spirit of the law by having these one-on-one conversations regarding official business that you would conduct as board members if it totals a quorum within all the conversations you have had or that have been had. I will not elaborate much further in terms of like, how does that look in terms of if you're wanting to get a sense of, I have a motion that I want to make and I want to know how people are going to go on it, and you've asked more than 8 how they feel about it, there is a potential here that those total conversations could violate the Open and Public Meetings Act because you're talking about official business with 8 or more members of the board. A meeting may be conducted in person or through electronic communication, but the court said technically there is no quorum. However, they are not so naive, and I'm assuming this is verbiage from the ruling, as to be blind to the fact that those inclined to violate the Open and Public Meetings Act could do so using the quorum requirement as a shield. So that's the court saying, like, don't get cute with this. Like, there are spirit of the law, and there are potentials to violate that spirit of the law, which could then bring into the ability to void some actions that were taken. So, next one to think about. So we are going to discuss, decide, or receive information as a group on issues related to the official business of the governing body at a social gathering. Carol is hosting a party, and you have all been invited. I hope I would be invited too, Carol. So, is this a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act? If a quorum is present, you may not discuss official business at the setting or in the setting. So the party at Carol's house is a social gathering, but you could violate the Open and Public Meetings Act if you sit and talk shop. There are a myriad of court cases about to what level talking shop is a violation versus not. But just keep in mind that if you are socially gathering and there's 8 or more of you present, you might want to be a little careful about what official business it is you are speaking about with one another in that setting. Please.
Definition of official business. Is there a definition in the court cases you read about official business, or could that same group talk about public education generally, but not an official vote that's upcoming or a...
That is a great question. I have an answer, but I also preface all answers. I am not your attorney. I am not offering you official legal advice. So with that caveat, most of what is out there is official business is usually in the realm of things you can take action on. So these are things that you would be actually able to come to the board and vote on and make changes on. General operation of education and thoughts about, you know, how teacher training style X versus Y is going probably would not reach the level of something you could take action on, although I think reasonable minds could differ at some point. But everything that's in there, in the court cases that I've glanced at very briefly, point to things you can actually take official action on in a meeting.
Would be official business. Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Interesting.
So, next one. Letters, emails, text messages between fewer than a quorum, so less than 8 of you, series of email exchanges between board members leading to vote to close an elementary school. Is this a violation of the Open and Public Meetings Act? So, according to the courts, serial meetings in groups of less than a quorum to avoid a public hearing or fashion an agreement may violate the law. This kind of goes back to the first one again. If you're starting to have enough conversations about formal business, especially something like closing an elementary school behind the scenes through texting, email, note none of this actually even included in-person conversation. This is all electronic communication. It could violate the law once again, especially if those communications total 8 or more people. But even here, when they totaled less than 8 people, it could possibly violate the Open and Public Meetings Act.
thought,
One sec, Brittany Cummins, Vice Chair Brittany
Oh,
Cummins.
sorry.
then I'll go to you.
So
Right on there, Board Member Lear.
this one talks about emails between fewer than a quorum, and it relates to an actionable item. The last scenario was social gatherings and a full quorum. So if I was to blend the two, what about information given to the full board by email or text that may relate, that's informational to an agenda item, but there's no discussion, it's just informational?
That should be okay. So according to my notes here, were kindly provided by Michelle Buse and Brian Questenberry, group email that simply conveyed information such as an office memorandum rather than conversations attempting to reach an agreement are okay. So I think that's the crux. If you're trying to reach an agreement in the communication, trying to sway votes in a sense, that's where we start to cross the line. But just conveying information is allowed.
yeah, I did. I think this raises an interesting point, and maybe goes to what Brittany said also, that if it also has to be about official business, the board would have no authority to close some schools. I mean, the board might have authority to close some charter schools, but it wouldn't have any authority to close Eastwood Elementary. So any correspondence we would have about a horrible situation at a school that we have no authority to close could not be a violation of the law. Wouldn't that be true?
Correct.
And similarly, any conversation that the board would have about bills that we liked or didn't like, because we have no authority to vote on them or pass them or have any meaningful action, seems to be okay. Now, we could get into the spirit of this law, which is taken lightly sometimes and not too, and more seriously other times, but in terms of the actual words, wouldn't you think that's true? Again, not expecting you to give us legal advice.
Yes, in my humble non-official attorney of you, although I am an attorney, but not yours, opinion, I would say,
Specifically, not
yes,
mine.
yes. I would say that anything you don't have authority over, you don't have the ability to conduct official business on, which is really where
I'd
the
never really
crux
thought
lies.
about that. Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Earl.
I think that answered my question, actually. I was just thinking, never mind. I think that answered my question, just
Okay.
what they said right there, having authority over.
Okay. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
So I'm going to split this hair just one more piece. So even though we might not have authority over, we might have authority to take action on. So taking the bill example, while we don't have the authority to change a bill, we have the ability, and we take that opportunity to take action on a bill, to make a statement of support or otherwise. And so because we have the ability to take action on a public statement of something, then would discussion on a piece of legislation then be something that we can only do in public?
I will say that is a great question. I don't know that I have the answer, but you are correct. You do have the authority to vote on support or opposing legislation. So I would venture a guess, and I will get Michelle and Brian to send an email that clarifies whether or not I am in left field. But I would venture a guess that if you were out there speaking amongst each other, trying to sway support or oppose votes over text or email, whatnot, regarding a bill, you could start rising to the level of that is technically something you could conduct as official business. It does not qualify as something you can close a meeting for, so you could start walking a line for sure.
So one thing that might help our board members just a little bit is remind us who and what we are. We didn't cover that in the very beginning. On that, we did a little bit on what is a quorum and et cetera, but as a body, this is really important for us to know, is that we have zero authority by ourselves. But as soon as we come together, 8 or more members, very simple, it's whether we're emailing, texting, in a meeting, when that number is 8 or more, then we become the State Board of Education. And so our communications and everything else, as soon as we're 8 or more, we're basically acting as a body. Now, we can try to split hairs and that, but I think where you're going on this is we need to be very careful. If we have something interesting or some information we want to share to a board as a member, you bet, send it out. When we get in trouble, or when we can find ourselves in trouble, especially if it's leading up to something that's coming up on an action item, is when we weigh in and we start commenting and communicating and positioning back and forth over something. That happens on our texts, it can be on our emails, it's grammarable, and so that's where all the caution goes. So we as board members, as we're going through this, as soon as we find ourselves in a 8 or more, in a position of 8 or more, we need to have a little bit of caution. And I think that's what, when we get to the spirit of the law, I think that's what's being implied there, is that caution.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we can't communicate and put information out there. I think board member Lear's going to challenge me on this.
I'm not, no,
Oh.
not straight up.
Okay.
I'm just going to say, I think that that it also says in the opening introduction that Jeff read about advisory groups, and advisory groups frequently don't have full, an 8-member board. But if we're talking about the spirit of this, and integrity is certainly the word of the day in the last few days, if we're having integrity about this, I think we shouldn't get right up to the line on some issues and say, well, that really isn't official action. And in other cases, we say, well, we're going to be really careful if there are 8 of us and discussing things that we might speculatively make recommendations about. So, I mean, my feeling about the Open Meetings Act, and I've said it pretty strongly many times, is that it's a sunshine law. It's that the best work the public does is in public, and I feel really strongly that I would not be in a group that there's less than 8 that corresponds and discusses issues on which we'll take action. So that's my level of sensitivity about it. I'm just saying, I think we should be consistent in terms of our spirit of the law interpretation.
And where boards, or a lot of boards are getting in trouble, it's not our board, is in the communications using the emails and the texts. And so that's why I wanted to bring that back up again. On that is a lot of times why a good portion of communications that would come to this board are FYIs, for your information. But as soon as it starts going into a dialogue of 8 or more, that's when people find themselves in trouble. So that's where I'm coming up with the big 8 on emails and texts and all of that dialogue. Because if you don't participate in it and you're 8 or more, that's a significant violation. Board Member Cindy Davis.
Just a question. I think I've done a reply all or sent an email out to the whole board like 3 times at the most in a year. And they haven't been encouraging or asking about votes or anything like that. But if I'm going to bring a motion to the table, I will often reach out to a few people and say, what do you think? And if they're like, I don't want to waste everybody's time. So is that appropriate? Or do I not put any feelers out ahead of time? I've never crossed an 8-person line, but like the other day, I was considering something in committee, and I said to Carol, what do you think about this? And she said, and I'm not going to waste my time. If the chair of our committee hates it, I'm going to spend my time doing other things. So I guess it's my question, is that appropriate to, in the effort of not spinning everybody's wheels here, if you get a feel for a few people, they don't like it, then not bringing something forward. Is that appropriate?
Sure. again, as the world according to Jeff Van Holten, the citizen and employee of USB, I would draw your attention to the screen again in the yellow box where it says, this is the example of if you have communications with less than a quorum, but the key phrase is the first two words. If you're having serial meetings and the whole idea is so that you can circumvent having to discuss something in an open and public meeting, even though you feel like you probably should, that is where I think you start to cross that line. When you really look at the spirit of the law and why it exists, to make sure that public business is happening in front of the public, that the public has the ability to observe. So getting a pulse on something, I think asking a couple of people is fine, especially if it results in, like, I'm just gonna let it lie. But I think you start to really cross that line when you start to use, as they say, the quorum requirement as a shield, or if you try and use this other idea of, like, I only talk to one person each at a time, so technically I didn't conduct business, but I've committed, my 9 people to vote on this. That's when you start to look into places where the court is going to call out the fact that, as they said in their ruling, they're not naive to the fact that people try and use technicalities in this law to circumvent it. So I think that's what I would use as your compass in deciding whether or not you're crossing a line or not, is make sure that you're not starting to really skirt the line, because what you don't want to do is say something in a public meeting, and so now I'm going to just talk to everyone behind the scenes so that I can make sure I don't have to do this in front of the public. We have our final slide. Kind of just a perfect segue to the end of this, Board Member Davis. These are the things you should ask yourself when communicating with each other as members of the board. It looks like we will need to get through the slide quickly as my battery is dying. Are we communicating official business? Will we be taking a vote on this matter? How many board members are involved in the communication? Is it a quorum? Is this a series of communications through electronic means that totals a quorum? Is there any evidence of trying to circumvent the spirit of the law? Are my emails or text messages public records subject to discovery under GRAMMA? Remember, if you're receiving a stipend for your cell phone, so the taxpayer dollars are paying for some of it, it is subject to GRAMMA, and you could have your text messages GRAMMA'd in terms of, I want to see every text about the closure of this school, or every text about the pulling of the funding of X. So keep in mind, all of your communications can be made public record, even if it's not necessarily done in a direct open and public meeting. So being on the safe side, it is most likely a meeting, and it violates the law if you have a majority of the board members present in a conference call. Great example. You have serial meetings, each consisting of less than a quorum to discuss usually something that would be official business. A majority of the board members using email or text messages to discuss, express approval or express disapproval of a matter that is before the board or is likely to come before the board. So that's the quorum piece. So to be on the safe side, treat electronic communications involving back and forth exchanges of viewpoints the same as a conference call. Avoid the use of reply all, copy, and forward to all board members unless absolutely necessary. And emails from the board leadership to all members that do not require a response is fine. That information sharing piece, again, especially from board leadership, is not going to trigger the law. You've all been very kind to me. Thank you for letting me step in last minute so our AAGs could handle some personal issues. And if you have more questions, I would encourage you email Michelle and Brian, because they are very excited to make sure this went well and that you are getting every piece of information you need. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for doing this on short notice, and we've inventoried these questions, and we'll certainly move those forward. Thank you.